Welcome back, everyone, to another very exciting episode of Southern Sorcery. And I mean very exciting because we have become MTG ambassadors, and I'm
super excited for it.
This was a major goal of ours that we set forth on a while back, probably, well over a year ago, and we got it. This was just kind of, one of those things that hit at the right time as our content creation, kind of has started to take off, and people have noticed our deck tech specifically about how we teach the game, and it's just honored to be noticed at all. So I just want to start first, before I dive into the video, I just want to say thank you to all of you, our viewers, subscribers. Obviously, you've helped us build up this channel to get noticed, to actually be a part of this program so that we can share content and some exciting stuff that you get to see maybe before some other content creators get a chance to do it. So this is just a really super exciting time for us to do stuff like this. That being said, we are MTG ambassadors. I just want to pinch myself a little bit, but I'm going to do a cool little deck tech today. This is for Foundations. This is a new concept of Magic. You probably are more familiar with it if you've been around for the game, as far as core blocks. I think the most recent one they did was what core 2022, maybe 21, 22 I think was the last one. I digress. So this is very similar, where there's going to be some staples that you're used to seeing, but there's also going to be tons of reprints. The unique thing though is this set is going to be around for 5 years. So it's going to be the backbone of Standard for the next 5 years, which is really cool to think about. A lot can happen in 5 years. There's an election happening right now, and by the time this rolls around, another one will already have happened, and more. So that's just a cool concept to think about. But with Foundations, they're going to have collector boxes, they're going to have play boosters, but they're bringing back one of my favorite things in Jumpstart. Jumpstart is a super cool way to learn how to play Magic. You just grab a couple packs, you can go head to head, but there's also a really unique thing where they've done with a lot of new legendary creatures. I'm sure you've noticed in the past with the Jumpstart, like with Kibo, with Anti-Blythe, all those cool legendary cards that were in the most recent Jumpstart before this one, made really good commander decks. And it's the same thing here. So we don't have any commander precons per se, but what we wanted to do, Daniel and I here at Southern Sorcery, is make our own precons with some of the cool Jumpstart commanders. I think it's a unique way to go about building a commander deck, because if you pull the pack that the legendary creature's in, you've got a lot of staples right in that pack. It's really going to have a theme base to it, and so you can just open that pack and go crazy with some heads up 60 card format, or if you want to throw it into 100 cards, you've got some good building blocks. But I'm excited because today's commander is a Teenage Mutant Turtle Ninja. Turtle Ninja. That's the wording. Yeah, Turtle Ninja. That's the one. This is Taeko, the Patient Avalanche. This is a Dimir card. So this is blue-black. The combination of those two colors makes Dimir. And the card itself, we'll just discuss. The commander will dive right in. It says whenever Taeko, the Patient Avalanche, enters tapped. So whenever you play Taeko from the command zone, as a commander, it's going to enter tapped. But whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it didn't die, very important to know, scry 1 and put a +1/+1 counter on Taeko. It's a really cool concept for him being a ninja, because there's a lot of ninjas that have a really nifty mechanic. I'm going to dive in this a little bit later, called ninjutsu, which is going to be a way to get rid of stuff from the battlefield without it dying. So really abuse that mechanic. And then his most important card feature says whenever he attacks, you may pay a blue or a black. When you do, target attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. Great, because we want a lot of unblockables. You'll also notice that in the theme of the deck as well. And so, speaking of the deck, let's just get into the mechanics of this deck, and we'll learn about what's in it. We'll learn about some of the cards that are specific to the set that are in it, that you can pull from Foundations and or Jumpstart as well. So first off, let's just talk about our ninjas in training. These are going to be smaller creatures, but we're going to have a lot of evasion, outright just unblockable and flying, things of that nature that we can do combat damage for, so we can ninjutsu in the other creatures that have ninjutsu. But first and foremost, I want to talk about some planeswalkers I wanted to add. Normally, I'm not a huge planeswalker type guy when I build my decks, but there is a specific planeswalker that just begs to be in this deck, and as a matter of fact, I ran all 4 of them. This is Kaito, and I ran each version of Kaito. I ran the OG Kaito Shizuki from Neon Dynasty, from Duskmourn, Kaito Bane of Nightmares. From Foundations, this is a new planeswalker that you can get in the Foundation set, Kaito Cunning Infiltrator. And then lastly, from Phyrexia All-Be-One, Kaito the Dancing Shadow. That was the one that was fringe. range, the Dancing Shadow. But let's talk about Planeswalkers, shall we? We're going to have 4 of these in our deck. They're all going to be Kaito Planeswalkers, which is just on theme because Kaito is either going to be mono blue or it's going to be those Dimir colors. Well, let's start with the OG Kaito. Kaito Shizuki is a legendary Planeswalker, Kaito, and he says at the beginning of your end step, if Kaito Shizuki entered the battlefield this turn, it phases out, which is a cool concept because I don't think any other Planeswalkers get the chance to do that once they get played. But his +1 ability is really nice because we're going to be doing a lot of aggressive swinging. This is going to be a pseudo aggro deck, so take that, all the mono blue like control players. Don't get me wrong, there is some control in here, but this is also an aggro way to build blue and black. But his +1 says draw a card, then discard a card unless you attack this turn. We're going to be attacking a lot, so hopefully we don't have to discard those cards. His -2 is very helpful as well. It's create a 1/1 blue ninja creature token with this creature can't be blocked, which is very important. We'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about ninjutsu. And then his -7 is his ultimate. You know, that's what often the last little piece there to most of the Planeswalkers is called their ult or their ultimate. -7, you get an emblem, which is very unique to Planeswalkers and really not a lot of interaction, hardly any at all, other than maybe like the Planeswalker Karn that can restart the game. Well, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but there's not a lot of ways to get rid of an emblem or really even interact with emblems. But it says you get an emblem with whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search your library for a blue or black creature card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle, which is absolutely busted because it can just go get us all of our best ninjas. Very hard to get to that though. Most people will try to do anything they can to obviously deduct loyalty counters from Kaito before you get to that, but that's okay. His +1 and his -2 are both great in aspects of like what we're trying to do in the deck itself. Next, let's just go in order. Let's look at the next Kaito they printed. This is Kaito Dancing Shadow from All Will Be One. This is 2 blue and a black legendary Planeswalker Kaito, and this one says whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may return one of them to its owner's hand. So you can bounce a creature back, which is cool because it's a leave the battlefield effect, so it can trigger your commander if he's attacking. If you do, you may activate loyalty abilities of Kaito twice this turn rather than only once, which is pretty unique. So getting to do your whole Planeswalker tick or down tick, whatever you want to do again, is really nice. And his +1 ability says up to 1 target creature can't attack or block until your next turn. Also very nice, if there's a threat on the board, you can neutralize it by allowing it not to attack, or if there's a blocker standing in the way of you getting through damage, you can get rid of that as well by saying it can't block. It's 0 ability, which sometimes Planeswalkers have 0, so it just kind of stays flat. 0 is just draw a card, which that's never a bad thing, right? Card advantage is always good in Commander. You've seen it on game nights. Josh Lee Kwai talk about it a lot. You've seen a lot of probably, you know, people at your pods talk about like card draw. They're not lying to you. Card draw is a great way to win games, and it always gives you advantage in your games. And blue does it really well. And then -2, you can create a 2/2 colorless drone artifact creature token with Death Touch, and whenever this creature leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So you can start flooding the board with these little drones as well, which is kind of cool. And it's another creature with evasion, which is nice. After that, we had a recent set from Duskmourn who made another appearance as a Planeswalker in the set, and this is Kaito Bane of Nightmares. For 2, a blue and a black, another Dimir. This Kaito is unique because he himself has ninjutsu, so this is going to be our first conversation about ninjutsu. So let's just talk about the mechanic itself. So ninjutsu is always going to have a different cost correlated to the creature itself. Normally it's going to be less than the actual CMC cost of the creature or Planeswalker in this instance, so you get to cast it for cheaper. It's not really a cast trigger. It's almost like a cheat. It's right. It's a 1-for-1 action, and I'll explain the rules text, which will probably bring a little more light to the mechanic itself. So for this instance, this Planeswalker Kaito has ninjutsu 1 black blue. Its normal casting cost, keep in mind, is 2 blue black. However, it says return an unblocked attacker you control to hand. So that's why we want a lot of creatures to evasion. It's always going to have that text, return an unblocked attacker you control to its hand. So if you can get through with an unblockable creature, this is going to trigger 99.9% of the time, unless there's, you know, some combat shenanigans taking place where things become blocked. And then it says put this card onto the battlefield from your hand, tapped and attacking. So this is very unique for a Planeswalker, right? Because Planeswalkers normally just can't attack. They're not really creatures per se. They're a separate entity in the game, almost like a different player with their own life total being their loyalty counters. But this Kaito says during your turn, as long as Kaito has 1 or more loyalty counters on him, he is a 3/4 ninja creature and has hexproof. So really cool that you're able to bring in a Planeswalker tapped and attacking with a ninjutsu ability. So ninjutsu, kind of the too long didn't read, you know, aspect of it is basically just a trade, right? As long as you have a creature that can get through into your opponent as far as an unblocked attacking a creature, then you have the ability to then, once you go to damage, basically to say, okay, I'm going to then pay this ninjutsu cost, and then it's going to swap out for that unblock creature for this creature. So it's a sneaky, which is very on theme for ninjas, right? It's been printed probably since the early days of like the OG Kamigawa blocks. It's a really cool mechanic. It saw, obviously a lot of play then, kind of went stagnant, and then once they brought back Kamigawa with Neon Dynasty, that really brought Ninjutsu back into the fold, especially with Kaito being a ninja himself and a planeswalker. So it's really cool to see like this mechanic being brought to life yet again. But yeah, we'll get into more creatures that have Ninjutsu abilities, but this is really cool. Let's get into this Kaito's loyalty ability. So his +1, you get an emblem right off the bat if you want. With ninjas you control, get +1/+1. So you can just keep making emblems with him, and ninjas just keep getting, stronger and stronger, which is, pretty cool. 0, you can surveil 2. With surveilling is just like scrying, except instead of sending it to the bottom of the library, you're putting it in the graveyard. Then draw a card for each opponent who has lost life this turn, which is going to be often, like I said, because we're going to be doing a lot of attacking with evasive creatures. Either they're unblockable, they're flyers, or some type of shenanigans take place where we can get damage through. And then finally, he has a -2 ability. Oftentimes you'll hear this as a -2 or a neg whatever the number is after it. Gosh. Excuse me. His -2 ability, oftentimes you'll hear it called that -2. Tap target creature, put 2 stun counters on it, which is pretty nice because now they're not able to block. So let me look that up real quick. What's the stun counter do? Pause, please, Daniel. This is a fairly new mechanic. Countertime, stun counters prevent tap permanents from untapping. That's what it is. Let's just start from Daniel, if you don't care, let's just start all the way back from the -2. I'll just, And then thirdly, he has a -2 ability. You'll oftentimes hear this called like a neg2 for shorthand. -2. It's just lazy, right? I guess. But -2, -2, neg2, whatever you want to call it. Tap target creature, put 2 stun counters on it. So the creature becomes tapped, and now it has 2 counters that say it prevents tap permanents from untapping, essentially. So that permanent stays stuck for a little while, which is pretty cool. And on theme because we're trying to get through, so that eliminates something from being untapped and now being able to block. So just more good stuff for us. And then lastly, the last version of Kaito we're going to talk about is the newest one that's come out in Foundations. This is a new legendary planeswalker. This is a mythic from the Foundation set. Super exciting. This is called Kaito Cunning Infiltrator. He is 1 and 2 blue, so this is a non-Dimir version of Kaito. This is his first mono blue appearance. And this says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on Kaito, which is really cool because, again, I've said it before, we're attacking a lot, trying to do damage a lot, so this Kaito could get very large, which is cool because he has a really cool ultimate ability. But let's talk about his +1 first. Up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card, then discard a card. So nice way to give yourself something that can't be blocked, and then a little bit of a card draw, which is cool. His -2 is create a 2/1 blue ninja creature token, which is nice if you're just having to like put a blocker out. It's just, just in case. We have a way to make some creatures, which is pretty cool. And then lastly, his -9, -9, -9, the big boss. You get an emblem with whenever a player casts a spell, you create a 2/1 blue ninja creature token. Talk about bonkers. That's a bonkers one. Any spell. Cast a spell, I get a 2/1 ninja. You did this, 2/1 ninja. You cast that, that's 3 2/1 ninjas. Crazy, because he comes in with 3 loyalty counters, and then whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on Kaito. A lot of times in this deck, I've goldfished this deck. I've played it on Moxfield, just play testing it. It is so quick and easy to get out a bunch of unblockable creatures, like 4 at a time. You could almost ult him in 2 turns, which is just bananas to think of, or 1 turn if it's later in the game. And that becomes just an absolute awesome way to win the game, because anytime someone's playing spells, and again, it's very hard to interact with emblems, nigh impossible, you've just got a bunch of 2/1s anytime someone plays a spell, which is crazy. You're going to flood the board with ninjas, which is fun. I love it. I think it's super exciting and a really cool way to win the game. So it's even got me drooling right now, which I'm just so excited. All right, next I want to talk about our ninjas in training. So these are going to be our smaller creatures, right? The ones that I was talking about that have evasion, that have unblockable, they have flying, they have some type of way to get damage through, so we can utilize our ninjutsu mechanic in the deck. Let's just go down to the list here. I called this as the ninjas in training portion, so we'll just start with Baleful Strix. Baleful Strix is an awesome card for any type of Dimir deck. It sees a ton of play in Commander across the board. Baleful Strix is a blue and a black for an artifact creature bird. This bird has flying and death touch, and whenever Baleful Strix enters the battlefield, draw a card, and it's a 1/1. What's really cool here is when we ninjutsu cards, again, it's a swap, right? So we're going to have Baleful Strix come back to our hand, and if we play Baleful Strix again, we're going to get to use that second ability that says enter the battlefield, draw a card. So that ETB effect, ETB entered the battlefield, is going to happen time and time again if we're able to Jitsu with Baleful Strix and play something, bounce it back. So that's a lot of card draw. It's also a flying death touch, so it's a really good blocker. Dissuades a lot of people from coming at you because a 1/1 can then kill something with death touch. Just a really good utilization of a card, and a ninja in training. Just what's even more terrifying than a creepy owl? A creepy owl that's a ninja as well. After that, we have Changeling Outcast, just a simple 1-drop. What I say about 1-drop is it's 1 mana to play. So 1 black mana gets you a shape-shifting 1/1. It has Changeling, so this card is every creature type. The important thing though is Changeling Outcast can't block and can't be blocked. So you're not gonna be able to soak up anything with it, but they're not gonna be able to stop it either because it's unblockable. Unblockable is great for this deck because it's gonna be an automatic ninjutsu trigger for the most part. There are shenanigans, but if I'm a betting man, I'm betting that we're always going to get ninjutsu triggers off of unblockable creatures. Following our Changeling Outcast, we have Dimir Infiltrator. This is a Dimir card, obviously in the name, blue-black. So for blue and a black, you can play this 1/3 Spirit, and the artwork itself is fun too because it almost looks like a samurai or a ninja on the artwork. I dig that, so it's an easy add to the deck. Dimir Infiltrator can't be blocked, so again, another unblockable creature, right, for 1/3. But he also has a cool mechanic called Transmute, so you can pay 1, a black and a blue. A lot of cards have this mechanic. It's a tutor type effect, which is always good. What I mean by tutoring is you are going to look for a specific card based upon restrictions of this card. And Transmute says, discard this card from your hand, so you have it. You've paid that Transmute cost of a 1, a black, a blue. Search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, which would be 2. Reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Transmute only as a sorcery, so that has to be done on your turn. It can't be done at instant speed, so there are like timing restrictions baked into that, which is a sorcery versus an instant. That's more, one-on-one type magic, which, if we want to do a video on that, we can, especially with a lot of new players coming into it with Foundations. We can discuss a lot of these like more eccentric rules, especially timing restrictions. That's a big one for a lot of new players. However, I digress. This is a cool mechanic because, late game, maybe you don't need another unblockable creature. So let's say you want to go get a Lightning Greaves. Let's say, there's just a lot of 2-drops that you can go get with this card. So a lot of more utilization, right? So it's an unblockable creature with a little bit of utilization in its tutoring ability with Transmute. I dig it. Following that card, we have Fairy Seer. This is another 1-drop, which most of your unblockables are small. They're 1/1s typically, and they are 1 or 2 drops. So the mana curve is very low for this deck. So that's another good thing. So it's like we can get started pretty quick in getting, turn 1 plays with some of these unblockable creatures. Fairy Seer is 1 blue for a 1/1 Fairy Wizard that has flying. So there's the evasion. It's not unblockable, but it has flying. But the cool part about this one is when it enters the battlefield, ETBs, Scry 2. Scry 2 means I get to look at the top 2 cards in my library, and then I can dictate if I want to leave them on top or put them in some type of order, put some on the bottom, one on top, both on the bottom, both on top, whatever I want to do with them. I can scry them, I can look at them. And so again, it's really cool because if we're ninjutsuing this card back to our hand and we're playing it again and again, we get to abuse that Scry 2 ability over and over, which is very beneficial, and it helps us dictate the top of our deck, which means we're not just, drawing by the seat of our pants. We have a little bit of control of what we're going to put into our hands soon after that. Great card for this deck. Following that one, we have Gudul Lurker. Gudul Lurker is a salamander for 1. It's a 1/1 that has ability, just can't be blocked. So another unblockable. I love Gudul Lurker's artwork. It's just a big old salamander coming at you in the water, and it can't be blocked. So just a slow, inevitable no, just a 1/1. He also has Megamorph for 1 blue. You can cast this face down as a 2/2 creature for 3 generic mana. Turn it face up anytime for its Megamorph cost and put a +1/+1 counter on it. So Megamorph is just like regular morph, except there's the +1/+1 counter aspect of it, I believe. I don't think that'll get a lot of play in this deck. Maybe late game, maybe Desperation Time calls for it. Instead of it being a 1/1, it's a 2/2, then you can make it a 2/2 later if you Megamorph it. Another way to, just utilization, right? I'd say for the most part, this card's always going to get played as, 1-drop for 1/1 that can be unblockable, so we can, again, ninjutsu some stuff in. Following Gudul Lurker, we have Invisible Stalker. Invisible Stalker is a 2-drop. This is a human rogue that is a 1/1. It has hexproof. So hexproof just says this creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. Hexproof is just the better version of Shroud. And then it says Invisible Stalker can't be blocked. So it's just like the Invisible Man. You just can't see him coming, so he's going to do all that damage. Just another really good card as far as like playing creatures that have evasion. Following that card, we have Mistcloaked Herald, another 1-drop. Mistcloaked Herald is a Merfolk Warrior for 1 blue for 1/1, and it can't be blocked. So you're starting to see the theme here, right? We're going to play a lot of ninjas in training that are wanting to get out our bigger ninjas with Ninjutsu because they can't be blocked. Following that card, we do have a couple other unblockables that I want to talk about. We have, let me just scroll down here, we have Phantom Ninja. Phantom Ninja is another card from the set itself. This one is going to be found in the Jumpstart pack. So I would imagine this card would be, I haven't actually opened the pack itself for the commander, but I would imagine this is one of the ones that has been built in with the commander. But Phantom Ninja, perfect card because it's an illusion ninja for 1 and 2 blue, and it can't be blocked for a 2/2. So a little more mana at the beginning. It's not a 1-drop or a 2-drop, it's a 3, but the flavor was too good. It's a ninja. We have a lot of, you know, things that buff ninjas, like some of Kaito's emblems, things of that nature that are going to be helpful for ninjas, so that's why it made its way in here. Plus the flavor of the artwork on it's great. It's literally an illusion ninja, and it can't be blocked. So again, we love that. We love anything that can't be blocked. Following that, we have, one of my favorite cards that I've added to, I have another Ninjutsu deck, and this card is just something I found in my bulk collection, but I was like, gosh, I love it. It's so good for like what I'm trying to do. This is Sage Owl. This is probably a card you've never heard of because it doesn't get a ton of play anywhere else that I have seen, but Sage Owl is 1 and a blue for a bird. I don't know why it's not an owl, but it's a bird. And Sage Owl says, when Sage Owl enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library and then put them back in any order. So I love that we can, it's not scrying, it's a little different because I can't put them on the bottom, right? But I do get to look at the top 4 and then sort them in that manner. So if I can do that with those and then have the Scry 2 abilities going on, so if I'm bouncing this in the Fairy Seer, a lot of like nice little bit of synergy going on with that aspect, because if there's stuff I don't want to see, I can send to the bottom, and then if I'm able to play my Sage Owl, I can dive a little deeper, replay my Fairy Seer, I can scry those 2. I like that redundancy. I like that synergy a little bit. I like the manipulation of my deck. I like having the ETB effects with the stuff that I am ninjutsuing because I can abuse that, right? I can use those ETB effects over and over again because it's just a 1-to-1 swap. So I love that. And so Sage Owl makes the cut for me. It's just a 2-drop, you know, one generic and 1 blue for a 1/1, but it has flying, so that evasion's there. Sometimes people have flying blockers, but for the most part, early game, if you're able to get these out, you can find an opponent of the 3 that you're playing against that won't be able to block that. So it's a sneaky ad. It may not be the best card. It just spoke to me whenever I built my Ninjutsu deck, you know, years ago, and now it's come back around again, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna add it again because Sage Owl's been my boy. He's been that dude for me. Following Sage Owl, we have our next unblockable creature, and that's Slitherblade. This is a Naga rogue. The Nagas are like the snake people in the world of Magic. Another 1-drop, 1 blue mana for a 1/2 Naga rogue, and it can't be blocked. So more redundancy there, just trying to play more creatures that can't be blocked. Speaking of which, our next one is Spectral Sailor. This one is also very unique in the fact that it has multiple little mechanics. It is a 1-drop for 1/1, but it has Flash, and I love that card. I love that mechanic for this because Flash is allowing me to play this card at instant speed. Normally instant speed is reserved for instants themselves, and they're normally spells, not permanents. Or I mean, I guess, you know, instants, not permanents. Whatever I'm trying to say. I guess both are technically spells. We won't get into that. I digress once again. I will get sidetracked. Anywho, it has Flash, so I'm able to play at instant speed. So what the cool thing is here is I can hold up a blue mana, and at the end step of, you know, right when it's become my turn, I can flash this in. Or if someone's going to try to think they're going to kill me with a big flyer that doesn't have trample, I can flash this guy in as a blocker. It's a 1/1, and now it can block that flyer that's coming at me. It's like, oh, what a surprise. But it also has a mechanic for 3 and a blue, and you can pay this as many times as you want. It has the semicolons, so it means it's just a recurring type of ability. Draw a card. So if you kind of get stuck and you want to draw engine, it has that draw engine. This card has too much utility not to add. Plus with the flying ability, it has the evasion, and you can flash it in at your end step. So I just like it. It's just one of the better, I think, like evasive type creatures that you can run in the deck. After that, we've got our last 2 ninjas in training, and that is one is Tormented Soul. This is a spirit, a poor Tormented Soul. We're gonna remove the torment when you become a ninja. How about that? Tormented Soul is 1 black for 1/1. It just says it can't block and can't be blocked. Again, we're just after that evasion. Following that one, we have our last one, which is a Triton Shore Stalker. Say that 5 times fast. This is a Merfolk Rogue. It says Triton Shore Stalker can't be blocked. So lastly, like I said, we just kept adding that redundancy in, and we have about 12 of what I call ninjas in training that we will use for our Ninjutsu abilities. And now since we've talked about it so much, let's just dive into the ninjas themselves who have ninjutsu, who are trying to teach our ninjas in training of what the true meaning of being a ninja is. So let's just go back to the top here and talk about that. We have our first ninja that I want to talk about, and this is Covert Technician. Covert Technician is 2 and a blue for an artifact creature, human ninja with ninjutsu 1 and a blue. Again, just take note of that. Very common, you will see the ninjutsu cost be a little bit less, so the payoff is better, right? A little more work involved because you have to get a creature to go through without, being blocked, but to reward you for that, if you're able to ninjutsu something in, you get to pay cheaper mana cost as if you were to play that from your hand directly. And then a lot of them have, like, whenever it deals combat damage type effects, which you're going to because you're swapping them out. So they've either chose not to block, they didn't have any blockers, and so you get to swap these out and then go to damage. So it's always, for the most part, there are shenanigans that can happen. There are, when you get the ninjutsu out that deals combat damage, blah 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 is going to happen. So without me blabbing on too much, 2 and a blue for ninjutsu for 1 and a blue. Return an unblocked creature attacker you control to hand. Put this card on the battlefield from your hand tapped and attacking. So now we're attacking. It's already been chosen, the blockers have been declared unblocked, or something happened that's unblockable, right? So it's going through, and then it says whenever Covert Technician deals combat damage to a player, you may put an artifact card with mana value less than or equal to that damage from your hand onto the battlefield. So we run tons of mana rocks, which we'll get into that a little bit later, for this deck, and with that reason, I think this was a really good card to add, because then you can play some of those for free, and it's very nice to cheat stuff out and just kind of get that card advantage on the battlefield for your mana, for whatever the concept may be. Maybe you're playing a Grease, maybe you're playing your, just whatever the case may be. A really good card, really cool way to, like, not only get a creature cheated out with the ninjutsu ability, but also an artifact right behind it. Following that, we have a Dokuchi Silencer. Dokuchi Silencer is a 1 and a black with a ninjutsu of the same cost, so whether you play it from your hand direct or ninjutsu it in, it's 1 and a black. Again, I'm not going to read ninjutsu every single time, but I'm going to read it one last time here. So the ninjutsu ability is 1 in the black, and for this instance, it always costs a little something different based on the card, but it says return an unblocked attacker you control to hand, put this card onto the battlefield from your hand tapped and attacking. So you get to do that. That's the whole, like, really the premise of the deck, right? Because, your reminder, our commander literally says whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it didn't die, because it's not dying, we're just swapping out. So that's going to trigger that. You get to scry 1, which is look at the top card. You can put it back on the bottom, the library, whichever you want to do. Then you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Taeko. So yeah, it's just feeding right into, like, what we want to do conceptually with the commander itself. And then Taeko has that awesome ability of basically making a creature unblockable by paying a blue or black whenever he attacks as well. So just a lot of redundancy on what we're trying to do with these ninjutsu abilities and with the unblockable creatures. Following that, our next ninjutsu creature is a really cool one in my opinion. This is Fallen Shinobi. Fallen Shinobi is 3, a blue and a black with a ninjutsu of 2, a blue and a black, so you get 1 less on the casting cost there. And this one says whenever Fallen Shinobi deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Until their turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana cost. That's just so good. I just love the fact, and there's a little bit of this as well. We've ran a couple little sub themes of redundancy in this deck, and we'll talk about them once we get to them. And one of them is basically playing our opponent's cards against them, which is really cool. I love that concept of, like, the sneaky ninja has, like, turned, your enemies, their enemies against them. Or their allies have become enemies. I'm gonna get there eventually. But yeah, great card. This is a cool way to play, like, some stuff, especially if you're playing against a deck that has, like, is gonna have, like, a lot of big creatures or big splashy spells. I think that's really cool. And this is just a really cool card with a massive payoff. And like I said, with the unblockables, chances are pretty high you're going to get that trigger. After that, we have Higur. I say it's Higur, like Higur, like figure, but with a H. Higur. Anyway, the Still Wind. Normally, the casting cost is 3 and 2 blue. If you ninjutsu it, it's 2 and 2 blue. This one's great because this is another tutor effect. So whenever this card deals combat damage to a player, you may search your library for a ninja card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. If you do, show up your library. And then another really cool mechanic here is 2 target ninja creature is unblockable this turn. So let's say that we have kind of run out of our ninjas in training, and this card's out, we can now start to give ninjas, specifically because we run a ton of ninjas, unblockable, just like our commander can when he attacks. So just more redundancy. That's very important in commander decks. The more redundancy, the better, especially if you're trying to go for a specific like style. This card fits that style perfectly. After that, we have Ingenious Infiltrator. This is 2, a blue and a black for a Videlka ninja or Ninjutsu, blue and a black. And this just says, pause please. This just says whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Nothing ever wrong with drawing a card. Again, that's some redundancy. We have that built into this deck because we want to constantly refill our hands to have ninjas that can be ninjutsu'd in. So that is something we constantly want to do, and this is a really cool concept because we're running a lot of ninjas. This will trigger a lot of draws based on that mechanic. So an easy add for me there. Next one's such a fun card too. I love this card. This used to be my commander for my Relentless Rats deck because it was a rat ninja. I thought it was so cool. But this is just a really cool card, and it absolutely deserves a spot in any ninjutsu style deck. This is Ink Eye's Servant of Oni. This is a rat ninja that costs either a 4 and 2 black, or you can ninjutsu it in for 3 and 2 black, so just 1 cost reduction there, but still, hey, reduction is reduction. Whenever Ink Eye's Servant of Oni deals combat damage to a player, you may put target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So there it is again, a little bit more redundancy for that style of mechanic too. Let's get our opponent's stuff. Let's not, like, hey, that's a really cool thing that got destroyed there. It's in your graveyard. Well, I want it now. And so, like, that's just a way to do it. And then lastly, for 1 and a black, regenerate Ink Eyes. Ink Eyes has a little bit of longevity. If Ink Eyes gets destroyed, a destroy effect, or gets killed in battle, you can regenerate Ink Eyes by paying 1 and a black, which means it stays on the battlefield. Basically comes back, I think, tapped, if I remember regeneration correctly. Again, we can definitely dive into like some of the more specific rules in a more in-depth video versus like spinning our wheels on every single keyword here, but it's important to denote because like it's hard to get rid of Ink Eyes, right? And that's great because we want to keep using that ability over and over again to start stealing stuff out of the graveyards. It's great to do that, and it's fun because you want to play that stuff more than they want to anyway. So yeah, you deserve it. After that, we have our next ninjutsu card, and this is Moon Circuit Hacker. This is our ninja for 1 and a blue. It's a human ninja, or ninjutsu for a blue. And this says whenever Moon Circuit Hacker deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card unless Moon Circuit Hacker enter the battlefield this turn. So basically that first time of ninjutsuing in will trigger that ability where you get to draw a card without having to discard a card. And then maybe you can ninjutsu that card again and keep using that type of strategy. So another really cool draw effect, a really nice ninja to add to your other army of ninjas. After this, we have another awesome rat that is just, more on theme for what we're already trying to do. These rat ninjas, I'll tell you, they're the ones that are the nastiest. You wouldn't expect it, but like the rat ninjas are the ones you need to watch out for, aka Master Splinter. I mean, it just is what it is, right? For 1 and 2 black, this is Nashi Moon Sage Scion. This is a legendary creature rat ninja, or it has ninjutsu for, I think it's 3 and a black, if I'm not wrong. I gotta zoom in here. Yes. So Nashi is one of the rare cards where the ninjutsu cost is actually more than the normal cost, and that is because the ability that Nashi has for dealing combat damage is bonkers. Whenever Nashi and Moon Sage Scion deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library, so everybody. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana cost rather than paying its mana cost, which is awesome because, a lot of times we've already like cast a lot of stuff prior to combat or waiting on stuff. Hit something big that you just can't afford, you can use life as a resource to pay for that card. I love this mechanic. It's so good. What a great card. Again, it's those rat ninjas that you gotta stay away from. They are the meanest around. Following Nashi, we have Ninja of the Deep Hours. Ninja of the Deep Hours is 3 and a blue with ninjutsu of 1 and a blue. And this one, if you ninjutsu it in, says whenever Ninja of the Deep Hours deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Again, never a bad thing to draw a card. This is another card you can get from the Foundation's Jumpstart packs. I would dare say this would be in the pack you're looking for our commander, Taeko. So yeah, I'll bet that faux show. Following that one, we have Prosperous Thief. This is 2 and a blue for a human ninja. This has ninjutsu of 1 and a blue. Whenever 1 or more ninjas or rogues, creatures you control, deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. So not card draw, but treasure tokens. Treasure tokens are really nice because it's just like mana, right? You get a treasure token, it's an artifact that says tap, sack this, and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Very nice to have that because not only are we drawing cards, now we're able to like create treasures, run a lot of ninjas, so hopefully we're getting to do both with the draw mechanics out and the treasure mechanic out, and really be able to like have the advantage the whole time on what we're trying to do. Following Prosperous Thief, we have Sakashima's Student. If you're familiar with Sakashima is all about copy effects. All the printings of Sakashima have always had like that hierarchy of like copying, and no different here. Sakashima Student is 2 and 2 blue for a human ninja, and it also has Ninjutsu 1 and a blue. And you may have Sakashima Student enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's a ninja in addition to its other creature types. It can be crazy because someone could have something out that is just absolutely bonkers, and you're able to Ninjutsu him in, copy that creature, and now it's tapped and attacking. So if someone has a dragon out, if someone has a Vorinclex out, it really, sky's the limit. A Crater Hoof, I don't know, whatever the concept is, a big creature or a creature that does something crazy when it does combat damage, you have this with this ninja. This is one of the more expensive ninjas because of that type of ability, and what I mean is expensive like financially, but just an auto add in my opinion because it's just so powerful. Or if you want to copy and have redundancy with one of your other ninjas, you actually have that ability as well. After that we have Satoru the Infiltrator. This is one of the few ninjas, I think it's actually the only ninja that I'm running that doesn't have Ninjutsu, but it does have a really good payoff. So Satoru the Infiltrator is a blue and a black, so Demir, and he has Menace. Menace is another keyword on cards. It says it can't be blocked by, it has to be blocked by 2 or more creatures. So like if you attack someone with 1 creature and that's all they have as a blocker, they're not gonna be able to block because they have Menace. So just more evasion, right? And then Satoru says whenever Satoru the Infiltrator and or 1 or more other non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if none of them were cast, so Ninjutsu is big here, or no mana was spent to cast them, you draw a card. So again, it's just payoffs from Ninjutsu triggers, and it's also a payoff for, basically, drawing a card, not payoff, but it's energy. So more card draw, again, never a bad thing, I promise you. Ask anybody that plays Commander or really Magic in general, card draw, card advantage, always a good thing. After that, we probably have another one of my favorite. This one is not a rat ninja, but still pretty nasty because it's a demon ninja, and I just love the ability for him as well. More redundancy for playing our opponent's stuff again. Spoiler alert. This is Silent Blade Oni. He is 3, 2 blue, and 2 black. Or you can Ninjutsu him for 4, a blue and a black. And this one is really cool. Whenever Silent Blade Oni deals combat damage to a player, look at that player's hand. You may cast a spell from among those cards without paying its mana cost. So if someone has like tutored something up like we were talking about earlier where they searched their deck and they had to show it, they just have something nasty, you can just like target that player and like, you know what, let me play that instead. I think it's better for me to do it than for you to do it. Or if you notice someone's playing a big dinosaur deck, they've got some splashy big like creatures, like just such a cool concept. I love this like kind of backdoor way to win the game by utilizing your opponent's decks against them. It's very ninja like and sneaky, and like I think it's just a really cool concept and fun that we're running that with the mirror colors, which is on theme. So like we're flooding the board with ninjas and just going to overrun you with ninjas and combat damage with unblockable, or we're just going to use your own stuff against you. It's just the ninja way. After that we have Silver Fur Master, another rat ninja. This one, the artwork looks very much like Master Splinter. Silver Fur Master is blue and a black. This is a creature, a rat ninja with Ninjutsu of blue and a black as well, so no difference. But this one is cool because it reduces the cost of Ninjutsu abilities. It says Ninjutsu abilities you activate cost 1 less to activate, which is nice because it just makes that stuff that's already cheaper for the most part even cheaper. And then this is also a boost because other ninjas and rogue creatures you control get +1/+1, which is nice. So some of our ninjas that said you can cheat artifacts in based off its power, now it's boosted, so now it's 3 or less, so you can cheat more artifacts in. Just a good card because if we're going to flood the board with ninjas and try to win that way, it's going to make our ninjas bigger automatically, so a very easy and good add for the deck. After that we have Thousand Face Shadow. I love the name on this one. This is a 1-drop, and this is another rare occurrence where the Ninjutsu is more expensive than the actual CMC of the card. This is a 1/1 with flying, so it has evasion as well, and it says whenever Thousand Face Shadow enters the battlefield from your hand, if it's attacking, create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature. The token enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. So again, just copying effects, never a bad thing, especially when we're trying to do so much damage, and we always have for the most part, most of your ninjas and Ninjutsu cards always have that when this deals combat damage, blah 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 blah, being like crazy explosive type stuff. this is great for it because, you know, what's better than like the Silent Blade only triggering once is triggering twice. It's a really cool concept behind that. Following this one, we have probably one of the most metal names in regards to one of the ninjas in the deck. And again, it's a rat ninja. What I tell you, you got to watch out for the rat ninjas. This is Throat Slitter, and that just sounds like a crazy like heavy metal band, or just like a group of ninjas you just don't want to mess with, right? Like if there's a rat called the Throat Slitter, I'm just not messing with that rat. You can have all the cheese in the house, it's yours, you've earned it. But this one is 4 and a black, or a Ninjutsu of 2 and a black. Whenever Throat Slitter deals combat damage to a player, destroy target non-black creature that player controls. So a way of controlling the board a little bit and getting rid of like things that are either slowing you down or problematic for your deck. This is a great ninja for that concept, and another auto ad for me. And that's it. Those are the ninjas. Those are everything that we have that are already trained in the art of ninjutsu and are ready to swap out with our ninjas in training as they do combat damage with the evasion. So that's our concept here. We're trying to bounce back and forth. So far we've looked at some win cons with Taeko itself. He gets bigger, so we can always like make him giant and start, you know, hitting people. In Commander, you have 40 life, so you know you can do 40 damage to somebody, they die. But the cool thing is if your commander deals 21, so just a little over half of that, you win the game that way too. So we have that avenue as well, because Taeko, if we get him out, he's going to be big. He's going to, you know, if we have a lot of Ninjutsu triggers, that's a +1/+1 counter every time. And we have lots of ways to make even him unblockable too. So it's just a really cool concept to win that line of winning. We can win with like stealing our opponent's creatures and doing other shenanigans with their own decks against them, or just outright flood the board with ninjas or unblockables. Speaking of which, how do you win with the unblockables? Well, let's just look at some of the unblockable payoffs, right? So unblockable payoffs are things that you're going to get rewarded for other than Ninjutsu for something dealing damage. In that case, we have some redundancy here with Thassa. This is an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. It's great because we're drawing cards like crazy. We have unblockables, so we should be able to get through no matter what. This is going to trigger with the unblockables doing damage outright, or them getting the Jitsu'd out back to your hand and something else. So we're always going to probably get those triggers with Thassa, draw a bunch of cards. Following that, we have the Battle Forged Battle Axe. This is an equipment spell that I love, and we can spread the wealth around because it's 1 to play it. It's an artifact equipment that says equipped creature gets +2/+0, so it makes our unblockables bigger. And then it says whenever equipped creature deals damage to a player, which we should be dealing damage since it's unblockable, create a token that's a copy of Bloodforged Battle Axe and equip 2. So with artifacts, it's very specific. Like you can pay that top mana cost at CMC to actually play it, and it's on the field, right? And then once it's on the field, it has another equip cost, right? So this is what it costs to basically give that piece of equipment to that creature. So for 2 mana, you can give that a +2/+0. When it deals combat damage, bloop, another one pops out, and then you can do the same thing over and over again. So now all of your unblockables have multiple Bloodforged Battle Axes, and they're just going crazy in battle like ninjas do. So another cool win con. Brotherhood Regalia. This is another equipment. This one is not so much conducive for dealing combat damage. This one is just going to help us actually get to the combat damage, because for 2, this is an artifact that says equipped creature has Ward 2, which means to target it, whatever spell you play, you're going to have to pay 2 more generic mana on top of that to actually get the spell to go through. It's almost like a built-in like counter spell, or like an aura shield. It's also an assassin in addition to its other types. If you're a fan of Assassin's Creed, this is where this card comes from the Universes Beyond set of that. And then it also has 2 different equip abilities. So it has equipped legendary creature 1, or just equipped normal for 3. So it's a cool concept where if you're trying to equip this onto a legendary creature, which our commander is legendary, it's a reduction for what it costs to equip it, and it makes it unblockable, which is great because we're just trying to make everything unblockable eventually. Following that, we have another payoff for dealing damage. That's Dowsing Dagger. This is a very unique equipment. This is equipment for 2 mana, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 2/0/2 green plant creature tokens with Defender, which means it can only block, not attack. It's cool because you can kind of group hug somebody a little bit. So, you know, someone's trying to make an ally, they're like, hey, I'm gonna play this card, I'm gonna give you 2 of those plants so you have a little bit of protection. It's okay to give people protection because all of our stuff's unblockable for the most part, or has flying, so we can get right around those blockers we're gonna give them. It's fine. It's like a temporary like handshake of like, hey man, like I did something for you, maybe you can do something for me later. Maybe. Sometimes politics work, sometimes they don't. But the important thing here is equipped creature gets +2/+1, so it makes something bigger. But what we're trying to do essentially is whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may now transform Dowsing Dagger, and it transforms into a really helpful land called Lost Veil. This land basically is just tap to add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. So basically it's a tappable Black Lotus, which is wild. I loved all these split plans. They did such a good job with this from, I think, the original Ixalons. They look good. The backside was just super. I love the artwork. It's like a map. It was really cool. But great card, because we're going to probably get to activate that land super quick with all these unblockable creatures we have. After that, I just wanted to add this card because I think it's one of the coolest like flip cards ever. It's just so fun, and it's kind of a win con almost of its own. This is Elbrus the Binding Blade. This is a very expensive equipment. This is a 7 mana equipment, so 7 mana is not cheap, but we can get there. It's commander. 7's not out of the question by any means. But you play this artifact, it says equipped creature gets +1/+0, and then whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, unattach Elbrus the Binding Blade, then transform it, and the equip cost is only 1. So the expensive part is playing it. Equipping it is cheap. So it transforms into one of the coolest like demons ever printed in the game. I think I love it. I think it's such a cool like concept of how it happens with the blade and then how you get there. So it turns into Witherngar the Unbound. This is a legendary creature demon with flying, intimidate, and trample. Intimidate is basically a keyword that says a creature with Intimidate can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or creatures that share a color with it. So if you don't have an artifact creature, you don't have a black creature, then you can't block it. And then Trample basically just assigns damage. So if like you block, this is a 13/13, you are able to block it with let's say a 1/1. Do the math, you just deduct that. That's 1 damage, minus the 13, it's 12. That means that delta of the difference there is going to carry over and actually still deal damage to your opponent versus it soaking it up completely. A creature without trample just means it's going to deal all that damage to that creature. That creature's going to die, but no damage is dealt to its controller. So really cool concept here, but the craziest thing about it is whenever a player loses the game, you put 13 +1/+1 counters on Witherngar Unbound. So you don't even have to kill them. It's just if this happens to be out and someone has lost the game, one of your players in the game, that means he's going to become a 26/26. And then if it happens again, he's a 39/39. It's just I love the flavor. I love it. I think it's awesome. We're going to get an immediate payoff because we have so many unblockable creatures that you should be able to get this out in 1 turn if you have the mana. So before you go to combat, you play it, you equip it to an unblockable attack, boom, you have Witherngar ready to roll. So I loved it. I thought it was just a huge payoff for like getting combat through with unblockables. Following that, we have another payoff, Sword of Feast and Famine, one of the best swords ever printed in the game. If you've been around the game, you are familiar with all the swords. They have one now, I think a sword represented for each like different double color. They all have protection from 2 types of colors, and so now that's across the board. There's like each color has a sword represented that gives it protection from those color combinations. But this one still is one of the originals and still remains top of the charts as far as a sword payoff. This is Sword of Feast and Famine. This is an equipment for 3 generic mana, and it says whenever equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from black and from green. So if spells, creatures have that color and it's targeting the creature that's equipped to, it has protection from it. So it means it just like phases right off. And then this is the important part though. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card and you untap all lands you control, which is great because after a combat phase, now you have access to all your mana again and you can play some really spicy stuff. This card just always gives advantage. It's a really good card with a really good like dealing combat damage payoff. And plus, if you're just having trouble getting evasion, this is another way to get evasion because you're going to have pro black and pro green. Pro just meaning protection, just shorthand again. And so being able to get around those types of blockers is just another way of redundancy for our evasion for actually dealing combat damage. After that, we have, these last 2 are really good. This one is Whisper Silk Cloak. Whisper Silk Cloak is a artifact equipment for 3, and it just says equipped creature can't be blocked and has Shroud. So if you remember earlier I said hexproof is basically Shroud on steroids or the better version. That's because Shroud says it can't be the target of spells or abilities. So that means stuff you're actually trying to do as well. So you gotta be careful with Shroud. Whereas hexproof says it can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponent's control. So you get to target it still, but they can't. So if you're trying to buff something, do something of that concept, you still have access to do it. Shroud's good. Hexproof is better, just is. But the cool thing here is equipped creature can't be blocked and has Shroud. Great, because we have protection. Throw it on your commander. Throw it on something that you're not really wanting to target necessarily with other stuff, but now it's unblockable, right? So you're just going to be able to get through on anything. So just a really easy add. And then probably one of the coolest win cons I think you can do in the game of Magic overall. I've seen it done very few times, but when it hits, woo, just great. This is Vorpal Sword. If you're familiar with D&D, you know what this sword is. If you, I think, roll a crit, it's an automatic like beheading, I think, in that game. So the folks at Wizards took it mechanically and made it just as nasty On the Magic side, right, I love what they did mechanically with it, the flavor. Just great job to the research and development team or whoever does that as far as mechanics go. Kudos, because it's great. Vorpal Sword is 1 black for an artifact equipment, and it says equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has Death Touch. Death Touch means if any damage is assigned from that creature is lethal, right? So like in our scenario earlier where I said a 12/12 fights a 1/1 and you block with that 1/1, normally the 12/12 smashes the 1/1, right? No harm, no foul, it's just out of the way. But if that 1/1 had Death Touch, because it's still dealing that one little bit of damage, that's enough to kill that 12/12 no matter what. So Death Touch is very cool way to promote you not getting blocked and you not getting attacked, because a lot of times people have to make a business decision and say like, is it worth me losing this big creature to this small creature, or vice versa? Is it worth me, blocking this small creature with my big creature? So that Touch is another piece of that evasion puzzle we like, plus it's protection, so it's a double whammy. But the very important part for this card, for 5 and 3 black, if you pay this mana, it's expensive, right? 8 mana is not cheap to come by, plus it's 3 black specific pips. By pip, I mean like the little swamp figure there, the skull. That specifically means you have to pay the black mana, not like any kind of mana. Until end of turn, Vorpal Sword gains...
I love it, it's so good.
Whenever a equipped creature does combat damage to a player, that player
loses the game.
You're done. You're out. I critted. You're beheaded. You've been fouled. It's over. I win. I love it. This is just, it's just such a, I promote you to do this. If you build this deck, put that on an unblockable creature, pay that mana, get somebody out, drink their tears within your chalice as victory, as it's so cool. And they shouldn't be mad. They just lost the Vorpal Sword. It's one of the coolest ways to lose the game. I love it. It's so flavorful. It's on theme here because we have combat payoffs. Again, it's just that redundancy. I love it. There's a lot of like alleys for us to win the game, this being one of them with an equipment. It's just so cool. It'd be great if you could just do it to every opponent and they just see it coming and they can't stop it. It's like, no, I can't, I think that's really cool. And that's it for our equipment payoffs. Other artifacts that I added are just going to be like our mana rocks. I won't spend a ton of time on these. What I mean by a mana rock is basically an artifact that's going to interact like a land. And so you're going to tap that artifact like you would a land to give yourself mana to play more resources in the game, right? So Arcane Signet, this is a mana rock for 2. First 2 mana you play it, you can tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's identity color, which is great because it should be any spell within your deck. After that, we have Dimir Signet, which is the signets all have, like you'll hear the name. I've said Dimir a lot, right? Like that's the black-blue. Selesnya is the white-green. Rakdos is black-red. There's all these like subtypes of double colors that come from Ravnica. And again, I won't spin my wheels on like the lore and like other mechanics, but there's rabbit holes that we can go down for days. Anywho, the Dimir side signet is obviously going to tap for our Dimir colors, right? So you can pay 1 to filter into this to tap for a blue-black. So if I have a land that taps for black, I can pay that into my Dimir signet to tap it for a blue and black, so I get, both colors that I'm looking for. Just another good rock. After that, we have a Felwar Stone. Felwar Stone is for 2. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Sometimes you might miss. You might be playing a game where someone's just not running your colors. That's okay. It's still ramping in an aspect. You can still use it for colorless mana, so it's just, it's still there. It's just, sometimes it's not 100% a payoff, but that's okay because not everything has to be color specific as long as we have the benefit of having more mana faster, because our color base, blue and black Dimir, is not quite the best at ramping. And what I mean by ramping is just accelerating your mana base early. That would be reserved for like green. Green is great at that. So again, I know I've said this 1,000 times, we can dive into other mechanics and stuff, but just a little sneak peek I wanted to like talk about for some of these cards. From there we have Soul Ring, one of the most popular mana rocks in the game, simply because you can pay 1 and it taps for 2, so it's an immediate bonus payoff. Like, you just 1 for 2, that's a great deal. I'll take those deals all day. We have other equipments like Swiftfoot Boots. Swiftfoot Boots is for 2. You can play this card. Equipped creature has hexproof, which is better than Shroud. Yay, we're learning. And it has haste, and haste is another mechanic I don't know if we've talked about. Haste just means, so normally in a game of Magic when you play a creature comes out and it has what they call summoning sickness, which just means it can't attack or activate abilities that way. It has to wait a full turn before it is no longer summoning sick. But if it has haste, or haste, whatever you want to call it. Haste is the actual name. Haste is just a name you might hear thrown around because it's funny, right? Haste, H-A-S-T-E. That a creature ignores summoning sickness. It doesn't have the sickness. It can do its thing immediately, which is really beneficial for a lot of things you want to see hit the board and do something immediately. Along the same lines, we have Lightning Greaves, which is probably one of the more popular equipments I would say that you see get printed a lot. Lightning Greaves, the same concept. For 2 mana, equipped creature has haste and shroud. So the haste is the same. You're downgrading Hexproof or Shroud, but it's cheaper, right? Swiftfoot Boots is 2 mana to play and 1 to equip. Lightning Greaves is 2 mana to play, but 0 to equip. It's free, so you can equip it, unequip it, and you can kind of throw it around different creatures. Lightning Greaves is super beneficial when you're trying to like spread the love as far as giving things haste, because once it's on the battlefield, potentially any creature you play after it now has the ability to have haste, because even if you're tapped out, that equip cost of 0 is very beneficial because you're able to throw that on there for free. Free is good. Talisman of Dominance, another mana rock. This one's for 2. This taps for both of our colors. This one's painful. What I mean by that is it can tap for a colorless mana by itself. So you can tap it for a colorless generic mana, doesn't count towards any color. Or you can tap it for one of our colors, blue or black. But if you do, it deals 1 damage to you. So a little bit of a price to pay. That's okay. Life is a resource in this game. You have 40 of it. Don't worry about it. Full send. Thought Vessel, another good card for this type of deck since we're drawing so many cards. Thought Vessel is 2 mana, and it says you have no maximum hand size. So if you're not familiar with the game, when you are playing normally in the game of Magic, you have 7 cards at the beginning of the game, and that is your max hand size, right? So if you are to pass the turn with anything higher than 7, you must, what they call, discard down to hand size, which is 7. If you have a card like this out, though, you get to ignore that, and you can have no maximum hand size. So it's great. But that's it about the rocks. Again, I don't want to spend too much time. Rocks are rocks, right? They're just there to essentially help us, ramp into bigger spells and have mana advantage early in the game. Let's talk about spells now, like sorceries and instances. We only have 3 instances that I put in here. One is Enter the Enigma. This is a sorcery for 1 blue. This is from Duskmourn. And it says target creature can't be blocked this turn. We want that, right? And draw a card. We want that, right? Redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. Just a great card for 1 blue. If you don't have an avenue to make something unblockable and you need that to get an Ajitsu trigger go off, it's a great card to have in your back pocket. Plus drawing a card is good as a cherry on top after the fact too. Following that, we have Feed the Swarm for 1 and a black. This is another sorcery. This says destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana cost or mana value. So there's a little bit downside. Obviously, you're going to take some damage, but you're going to get rid of something that's either stopping you, that's just a problem for the whole board. An enchantment that could be like, potentially like shutting off what you're trying to do. Like there's lots of enchantments that, you have to pay mana to attack that person. So that'd be something you want to get rid of, right? Because we're trying to be aggressive. We're trying to attack. So that's a good card. Basically removal spell, right? Feed the Swarm is another card that you can find in the Foundations set as well, not in just Jumpstart. This one's actually in the Foundations block as well. After that, we have Kaito's Pursuit for 2 and a black. This is our last sorcery. This is for 2 and a black. Like I said, target player discards 2 cards. Ninjas and rogues you control gain menace until end of turn. So that means they can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. This is a good way to win the game, essentially. Let's say you have a flooded board with a bunch of ninjas and they're all boosted up, but your opponents have some decent blockers. This is a good way to give them all evasion because they all have menace, and you're able to swing in and deal enough damage to win the game. Or it's a good way to like ninjutsu some stuff in if you just have an issue of finding some evasion, because menace is still a way to give invasion because they have to double block. Maybe they don't have that amount of blockers. Maybe they don't want to send specific creatures because they're valuable to them to be blocked. So this is another way to do evasion plus maybe win the game late in the game. Moving on from sorceries, we have instants. The biggest difference between sorceries and instants are going to be their timing. Sorceries playing on sorcery speed, which just means that you have to play them on your turn. Like you can't respond with sorceries. You have to have priority. It has to be your turn, and that's when a sorcery can be played. Instants, they can be responsive, so they can be played on other people's turns. Again, we won't get into, I won't spin my wheels too hard here. I can get easily distracted, but that's the main difference. So let's talk about some instants here. This is where the color blue and black probably get the most hate, is because of their type of control, like how you're controlling the game, getting rid of issues or saying no to things. This is what gives them a stigma, maybe. I love blue. I think the color blue is awesome. A lot of people hate blue because of what it can do with all this control, but you know what? It's all right. First instant I'll talk about is an offer you can't refuse. This is 1 blue. This is what we call a counter spell. Instant that says counter target non-creature spell, its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. So there's a payoff. It's like, hey, I'm going to stop you from playing this, which means, you can't play it, but you are going to get some treasures. That's nice. After that, we have Deadly Dispute, which is 1 in a black. As additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, and then you get to draw 2 cards and create a treasure token, which is nice. It's just card advantage plus treasure token early in the game. Really nice to do because you can you're drawing plus you're ramping with treasures, which blue and black desperately need that style of ramp with artifacts. And plus you're going to make lots of tokens that you can destroy that aren't going to be necessarily, I don't think, bad per se to get rid of. After that we have Essence Scatter, and actually all these can be found in Foundation or the Jump Starts as well. Essence Scatter is 1 in a blue for another counter. This one is a specific counter. This one says counter target creature spell. So it's good just to hold these in case people play something that's just going to really like wreck your board or do something very abusive. Like this would be great if someone tries to play a Craterhoof Behemoth or something that's just going to do something massive in the game. This stops it and saves you and helps preserve like your stuff. Again, that's why people don't love blue, but you got to add control. That's the power aspect of blue, right? So to not use it, at least in some form or fashion, is handicapping yourself in regards to like the true power of the color, right? It'd be like playing green and not ramping, playing white with a little bit of like no mass removal, etc. Red with no burn. I don't know, like you don't have to run a ton of control, but I think it does a disservice of not running a little bit of control. Fake Your Own Death is a really cool card. This is a way to protect your commander. For 1 in a black, this also can be found in the Foundation set. This is until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control, and you create a treasure token. So a great way to like keep your commander on the board, keep a specific creature on the board that you don't want to necessarily stay dead. So it's a way to return it and Fake Your Own Death. I love it. It's like Mafia style. It comes from a set that was Mafia style with New Capenna. The next one is from Dustmourne. This is Get Out, which is a scary set, which makes sense. For 2 blue, this one has a little bit of utility. It's an instant that says target counter creature or enchantment spell, or you can return it to 1 or 2 target creatures and or enchantments you own to your hands if you want to bounce something like some of your ninjas in training that you want, or some of your ninjutsu type stuff back to your hand. Great utility spell. You can counter stuff, you can return stuff. It's just got a lot of playability. Following that, we have Infernal Grasp. This is another destroy effect. For 1 in a black, this is an instant that says destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. Just a great removal spell from black. Another card that you can find in the Jumpstart series of Foundations. And then lastly, we have Negate. Negate's another counter. It's our last counter. So we're only running 4 counters technically if you run Get Out as a counter. But Negate says 1 in a blue instead of a creature counter specific. This one says counter target non-creature spell. So if someone's trying to wipe your board or do something to really mess with you, that's a an instant spell or a sorcery spell, this would be the time you play Negate, because you can counter target non-creature spell for 1 in a blue. Just a really good utility counter to kind of have in your back pocket to save your board from getting wrecked. But those are our spells. The last thing I want to talk about is enchantments and then our lands. We won't spend a ton of time on lands, but our enchantments, we've got some really cool ones here. We've got Cunning Evasion. So enchantments are kind of their own thing. They stick around as enchantments on the board and that affect either your board or the entire game state as well. But this enchantment is called Cunning Evasion for 1 in a blue. This enchantment says whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, we return it to its owner's hand. So as soon as it becomes blocked, you get to bounce it right back. It's a really cool way to fill our hand back up with our ninjutsu spells. Either they're going to take the damage and you get the ninjutsu trigger because they all have when this creature deals damage. Chances are they're going to want to block it, right? But as soon as it's blocked, it gets right back to your hand. Great card for any ninjutsu deck. I would say you could look at any database and this card's going to show up 99 times out of 100. After that, we have a card I added. It's just another kind of way to win the game, or at least like really do some damage. We have Grievous Wound from Dustmourne. This is 3 and 2 black. This is an enchantment aura, so you actually get to choose a player, probably someone you just don't like. Enchanted player can't gain life, and then whenever enchanted player is dealt damage, they lose half their life rounded up. So they can get very early and it hurts, right? Like, they're going to go from 40 to 20, 20 to 10, 10 to 5. But then once it gets to a small life, you start like cutting, into it. So it's unique in that aspect of how to kill them. But like, as far as doing like a lot of damage early, this card can definitely do it because we run unblockables, remember? So like, you can really deal that damage early and just knock them down into a very manageable life total to knock them out of the game. It's another way to win the game for someone who has, a lot of like life resources, gaining life. This card will shut that off. After that, we have Reconnaissance Mission. This is going to be very similar to Titan of Thassa. This is an enchantment for 2 and a blue. It says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. And it has cycling. Probably never will do that unless you just don't need to draw. But if you didn't need to draw, you wouldn't cycle anyway. But if you need to cycle it, you can pay 2, discard that card to draw a card. That's what that means. Pause, please. I'm going to sneeze. All right. Following Reconnaissance Mission, we have one of the MVPs of the deck. This is Rogue Class. This is an enchantment that has levels to it, which is really unique. So you play it for a blue and a black, and immediately you get the first level, which says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player Exile the top card of that player's library face down. You may look at that card as long as it remains exiled. Level 2, to level it up, you have to do this as a sorcery. So remember, sorceries are on your turn. For 1, a blue and a black, creatures you control have menace. And so we talked about menace. This is more evasion, so just more on theme. And lastly, it's this last part that really goes on theme with what we're trying to do in regards to like playing our opponent's stuff. So for the last level, after you level it up, you can go to level 3 for 2, a blue and a black. You may play cards exiled with rogue class, and you may spend mana as though it were of any color to cast those spells. So as you've exiled cards from your opponents by hitting them with rogue class out, once you get to that final level, now you can play those cards, and even if they're in a different color of the game, you can spend your mana as if it was mana of any color. So you can just dictate like, this blue equals a red, this white, or this black equals a white. You know, whatever the concept is, you know, you can play that. This black equals a green. That's really cool. I love that concept, and Rogue's Class is such a bomb. It's so good, especially in a deck where we're running a lot of unblockable creatures, and able to get that first payoff where we get a lot of cards exiled. Just a very good 10 out of 10. And then our last enchantment I want to talk about is Smoke Shroud. This is a very specific enchantment which will only see play in a ninja deck. But hey, we're playing a ninja deck, so let's play it, right? It's 1 in a blue, it's an Aurora, it says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. And then whenever a ninja enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Smoke Shroud from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to that creature. So if someone's gotten rid of it before, as soon as you play a new ninja, it comes right back like it never left. I love it. It's a great card. Again, it's all about evasion. It pumps. It can help in the end game with a specific ninja that's huge that you want to get flying to. Just another really chef's kiss card. And then the last thing I want to talk about is our lands. First off, we run 11 islands and 11 swamps. I'm going to run 35 lands, right? Let's talk about the lands that aren't basic, right? So islands, Bazooka Bog, put that in there. Bazooka Bog's great. This is where I probably cut the most cost in my land, since I spent a little bit, had a little bit more involved with my idea of like what I wanted to spend for creatures and stuff. But for Bazooka Bog, whenever this comes into play, it comes in tap. But whenever it enters, you exile target player's graveyard. So if someone's just going crazy with graveyard shenanigans, Bazooka Bog just shuts that right off. Clearwater Pathway, the pathway lands you can play on either side. They're really cool because you get to dictate which color you want when you need it. So whenever you draw it, if you're really looking for a blue or a black, you get to say that's what I needed. You can flip it to either side and play that as a land. Command Tower, another great land. It's going to tap for any color in your commander's color identity. Darkwater Catacombs is a filter land, so much like the Signet, you pay into it to tap it for both colors. So it's going to net you 1 mana for paying it into it, and it's going to be the colors that you need for the deck. Demir Aqueduct, these are the cool like bounce lands. So whenever they come in tapped. The cool thing about them is they bounce another land, but then eventually they untap and tap for 2 mana, so you're not going way far back in time because you had to bounce a land. You're able to like kind of offset that in next turn by having a land that taps for 2 versus 1. Drowned Catacombs, just going to be an art color identity. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a island or swamp, which is really easy to do since we're running 22 total of those type of lands. Exotic Orchard, great for multicolor decks. You can add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls can produce. More often times than not, you're going to find that to be the case with 3 opponents, that you'll have at least 1 of your colors. If not, it's okay. It's just a land that can tap for, colorless. It's not the end of the world. Gloom Lake Verge, this is from Duskborn. These are the new lands. I love them. I think it's really cool. You can tap to add a blue, or you can tap to add a black, but you can only do that if you control an island or a swamp. I love that. It's really cool redundancy within like the deck you're trying to build. It's great. Path of Ancestry, super good card for it. Does enter battlefield tapped, which normally I don't like lands that come in tapped, but this one says tap to add 1 mana of any color, your commander's color identity, which is great. But then it says when a mana is spent to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with your commander, you scry 1. It's great because we run so many ninjas. He's a ninja. He's a turtle ninja. Not to be confused with the no, for copyright reasons. Just kidding. But yeah, this is a card that, scrying, again, it's just more manipulation on the top of the deck. It helps with that. Rogue's Passage, great card because, again, Rogue's Passage comes in, it can tap for colors. You can pay for it to tap to give target creature it can't be blocked this turn. So target creature can't be blocked this turn. It's great. Just more on theme. Shipwreck Marsh, same concept here, just another land. Enter battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. So just don't want to play an early game, but after that it's okay. Blue and black, it taps for Tainted Isle, another filter land. You can tap to add a blue or black, activate only if you control a swamp. And then lastly, Underground River. This is a pain land. You can tap that at colorless, or just like the Talisman, you can tap it for the colors we need, but it will deal 1 damage to you. Those are our lands, 35 lands, 5 enchantments, 16 total artifacts, our rocks, and our equipments, 7 instances, 3 sorceries, so 10 like spell specific spells, 29 creatures, 30 if you count our commander, and 4 planeswalkers. It's all Kaitos. Oops, all Kaitos with our Captain Crunch. Oops, all Kaitos. But that's it. That's the deck. Tell me what you think about it. I want to know your thoughts. What did I miss? What would you add in a deck that's centered around like Ninjutsu, or maybe like playing your opponent's type stuff? I think, I'm gonna pat myself on the back. I think I did a really good job of having like several avenues for win cons. After playtesting it, it looks like turn 6 to 7. So this deck's, it's not powerful. This would be what, most people probably label like a flat, 5 to 7 range, depending on like what your table's concept of power is. But that's it. I've jabbered on for forever. I know this is a super long video, but I wanted to like dive into some of the cards. There's tons of Foundation cards. I think in total I added 15 cards that you can pull straight from Foundation, straight from Jumpstart. So be sure to check that out. We're going to have way more videos coming out with other awesome ambassadors that they've chosen as content creators that are also ambassadors for Foundations. We're going to collaborate with them. Shout out to all those awesome people. Give them tons of views and watches. Thank you again, Wizards of the Coast, for the opportunity for this. This is so awesome. I love this game. Never thought I would be in this position. Just wanted to do this channel and make content for fun. I mean, that's still the case, but now we're just getting to do stuff like this to really just like shine. And it's just such a blessing and awesome opportunity. So we want to say thank you. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting us too. Like, you've helped us along the way massively. All the subscribers who've been with us since day one, you guys are the goats. But yeah, like and subscribe. Do all the cool stuff with the buttons. Let us know what we did right or wrong with this video. I'm excited to do some more stuff. Stay on the lookout for all that. Thank you guys so much again. We really appreciate it. It's been such a blast to get to this point, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. More to come. It's going to be exciting, super great stuff coming your way. So in the meantime, make good decisions, have a great time, enjoy nature. The weather is great. Hopefully you had a good Halloween, got lots of Halloween candy still to eat. Thanksgiving on the way. I'm gonna keep yabbering, but the holidays are here, so just enjoy life. It's a good time to be alive, right? So thanks so much. Have a great one. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.